Hey, y'all, welcome back to Dynamic Decisions, where strategy and knowledge turn Robin decisions into Batman decisions. So today we're thrilled to have Katherine Johnson, who is Counsel, Chief Governance Officer, and Head of ESGI at StorJ. She's joining us here. Everybody, welcome. Katherine is at the forefront of tackling data privacy and security. Her extensive experience, it includes leading compliance management at Coinbase during their hypergrowth phase, and she has a wealth of expertise in banking, regulatory compliance, and employment law. So Katherine also, especially unique to what we would appreciate in this community, we could call her another expert in entrepreneurship. And that includes managing data privacy and diversity, as you kind of can tell from her title. So today we're going to delve into her experience at StorJ. We're going to explore strategic decision-making frameworks and discuss the future of data security and privacy in the tech landscape. Let's kind of jump right on in. Katherine, walk us through your journey at StorJ. What's been some of the biggest operational challenges, particularly in the context of integrating decentralized data storage solutions?
Well, first and foremost, Tisha, thank you so much for having me here. I am thrilled to be on, and I'm just so grateful to you for having this podcast. I think a lot of people don't think so much about decision making, but it's just core, obviously, to everything that we do. So I'm really glad that you're doing this, and honored to be a part of it. And so I joined StorJ 6 years ago. I started out as an advisor to the company. I learned about it when I was at Coinbase. We had an employee resource group for people of color and invited Sean Wilkinson, the founder of StorJ, to come speak to us. And I learned about the company and was really impressed with what it was doing. So what StorJ is it's an enterprise-grade distributed cloud platform. And we're, as you mentioned, tackling really big issues right now around data security, data privacy, and these issues are going to, and environmental impact of data, these issues are going to be becoming ever more important in our lives collectively and how we address them. So I'm grateful to be at a company that's, taking on these big challenges. And what's nice about that is that it's through the actual infrastructure itself. By being distributed, we address some of those issues because you don't have the large data centers that are taking up all of the electricity, and you just, the security and privacy is just built in. So then how do you build a company around that? And when I was joining, it was still a very young company. Of the processes that we now have in place weren't there. So we've gone through this growth trajectory that, I feel very honored to have a seat at the table and been a part of. And the background at Coinbase certainly helped because of that growth. We're now at about 80 people. We are a remote first company. We always have been. And let's see, we've got folks all over the world. 16 different countries, I think we're at now. And so it's going to be interesting to dig into how you do decision making in that kind of environment. But to get back to my trajectory, so I was an advisor to the company after learning about it and seeing what they were doing and just, being really fascinated by it and impressed with the sort of responsible approach that they're taking to technology. And that's near and dear to my heart. And so, I worked with them for about 6 months. And then I left Coinbase, and the then CEO, Ben Golub, said, "So what are you going to do now?" And I was thinking, well, I just was at Coinbase from 2017 to 2019, and I think I'm ready for a break. I'm going to take a sabbatical. He said, "Well, we're ready to hire our first general counsel." I was like, can't say no. And so, so I worked with the, small executive team then. We've grown since then, both in number and in terms of products. We had 2 acquisitions last year. Whereas we started out more as a data storage platform, we really are now cloud computing platform. And so I helped stand up the people team, helped stand up the compliance structure, and have been advising the company since. Now, I've recently moved into this new role of Chief Governance Officer. And so the timing of this is really perfect because I've been thinking about decision-making a lot and how we operate as a company that's going through so much growth.
Yeah, I'm really curious about some of the key decisions in the growth trajectory. So let's start with, so we you were hired and some of the decisions that needed to get made first were, I'm really interested in some of those. We had to decide, how do we stand up a people team, right? How many people do we need on that people team? Tell me a little bit about frameworks that you may have applied in order to think through some of those strategic decisions.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very grateful that the team that I joined really empowered me to take my vision and implement it. And what I mean by that is that I've worked at a lot of different companies. I've worked at the largest institutions and organizations. I worked at Ernst & Young. I clerked for 2 years in the Southern District of New York. That's a very small group team. There were three clerks to first time judge. She was actually moving over from Eastern District bankruptcy, Judge Laura Taylor Swain. And then she was at Southern District of New York. So I was one of her first clerks. And then I've also built my own organizations, as you mentioned, entrepreneurialism. My husband and I had an ice cream company in Brooklyn, New York, and we started that from the ground up. I love building things. I really do, because I've seen where companies have started off on I'm not going to say the wrong path, but not thinking about the future so much and just kind of dealing with the day to day and getting up and running and just, you get so busy. It's like, it's easy to forget about what do you want things to be like. And I think about, I'm a mom, I've got 2 kids, 20 years apart. So yeah. So I've had a chance to also kind of think about, okay, what do I do differently this time? We've always got to take and learn from, learn what we've done before, what we've done right, and what we want to do differently. And so I've seen a lot of companies get so far down the path that they want to do something different, and turning that around is really hard. Now, it's never too late. So long as you're living, breathing, and as an organization, so long as you're still running, it's never too late. However, it's really important, if you have the chance to get it right from the beginning, to do so. And my background being compliance, what I've done, I've learned so much from that. And when I was at EY, I was able to see lots of different banks and how they dealt with really big challenges, so I was able to see what the different ones were doing, what they were putting in place, and then take that to the different places. And as a matter of fact, when I joined Coinbase, I didn't have any background in technology, and I thought, oh gosh, this is big. What am I going to do here? But that's actually one of the reasons that they wanted me, was because I had that firm background in compliance. I spoke the language of the regulators and was able to take that structure and build it at Coinbase. And so I have a lot of respect for structure. I think that it is just critical, having clear structure, having clear processes, and the structure is the foundation. And then the processes that you build, you're not always going to get it right. Sometimes you can put in too much process. Sometimes you can build it and then forget about it. And then it's like, wait a second, don't we have a process here? But if you take, like with compliance, what you do is you kind of pick everything apart and you look at it and you say, okay, if there's a risk here, what are we going to put in place to mitigate that risk, control it if it does come to be? And so when I was just starting out, and we were, a young, scrappy company and making a lot of decisions, just like sitting around the virtual table saying, okay, what do you think? What do you think? I thought, this is a really great opportunity to try to get it right, where other, especially tech companies, have not. Obviously, inclusion is really important to me. And I was glad at StorJ that we already had a set of values to build from. And the values have been part of our decision-making process. Even when we were young and scrappy, always going back to the values. And now that we've grown, it's still going back to the values. And those values can help you build the structure, because you can look at the pieces you put in place. Anything from, how you do performance reviews, and ask yourself, okay, is this consistent, with being sustainable, with being trailblazing, with being open, all of these things. You can always go back to it, but being respectful and being joyful. Those are our values.
You know what's so insightful about what you just said is that we often tell businesses that you can have all the crazy strategy in the world, but if your core business strategy is not sound, then any other strategy is likely to fail. And so when you talk about your values are a part of your core business strategy.
Yeah.
So if that isn't working, then of course it's highly likely my hiring strategy will not be successful, right?
That's
So
right.
that's really a good connection that you just draw, which brings me to my next question, which is really about what's your framework for making high stake decisions, even when you have incomplete information? Now, I can guess that it has something to do with things like having your core strategy in place, but I'd love to know from you what are some of what is the framework that you deploy for those high stakes decisions?
That's a great question. I think that it goes back to the structures that are in place. And an example of that is our risk matrix. So, we didn't always have one. And then at some point, I was like, something's missing here. We're operating in an environment that historically has been unpredictable. So we use blockchain. It's the platform itself is not on the blockchain, but the way that we're able to get all of these great benefits of distributed storage and distributed computing is by utilizing a token, a digital asset, to pay storage node operators all over the world. And so that's how it's globally distributed. Now, operating in the United States, as you know, it's been an uncertain regulatory landscape, which has been challenging and, to me, concerning because, I think that some of the missteps that our industry has made generally has been in not having, a variety of perspectives when we've been building the technology. We've seen that with things, we've seen it left and right, technology that doesn't recognize certain shades of faces or does not, that puts people who are using the technology at risk because there are things that haven't been thought about, technology that people can't access because of, their own, whatever challenges or difficulties they may be having. I was diagnosed with ADHD last summer, this late in life, and I realized, now I understand why some things have been challenging to me and why it's important to make sure that we keep in mind all of the different challenges that people might have when we're building this technology. So that was really important to me to make sure that we were an inclusive environment. It's actually, one of the ways that StorJ Institute got started. So it's our mission to have more, to have more inclusion in the development of emerging technology.
Yeah, tell me more about StorJ Institute. I'd love for you to weave in a little decision making there because in the context of what the Institute is there to accomplish, there's a certain subset of decisions for your organization. So I'd love to maybe just off the cuff tell me a little more. Yeah.
Well, now, so StorJ, like I said, we're at about 80 people right now. And we had 2 acquisitions last year, a couple of years, and we had a leadership change. So a lot happening in the company. The CEO who was at StorJ when I started is now the executive chair of the board. And we've promoted from within, from an older acquisition that we did of Crowd Storage. So one of the folks that we got with Crowd Storage is now the CEO. So lots of changes going on there. But before that, so that was 2024. Before that, a couple of years ago, we were looking at, what can we do to give back to the community? What can we do to, help make sure that the technology of the future doesn't make the same missteps and mistakes that we've seen in Web 2, and how do we bring in the values of the company? What can we do with that beyond the company? So those values have been the foundation of StorJ. But like I said, one of the reasons that we brought Sean Wilkinson to talk to us is because we wanted to see people who have been successful, people of color, people who are traditionally marginalized, who are having success in tech. And so we built StorJ Institute. Now, in building StorJ Institute, obviously there were a lot of decisions to make about that. Is it going to be a 501c3? Is it going to be a 501c4? Ultimately, 501c4. Is it something more like a DAO? Is it something more like grant-making organization? And so what we did was we took our time with it. When you're making big, important decisions, if you don't have to rush, don't rush. Don't rush. And, we looked at what others were doing. We looked at where the need was. Yeah. What doesn't exist that we can add, where we can contribute. And at the same time, resources are always limited. So how can we maximize the resources we have? Really just through conversations, through open conversations about what was needed. Were we able to formulate a plan to create StorJ Institute? And those were conversations that were had at all levels, across all levels of the organization. One of the things that I think StorJ has really been amazing at has been involving the team members, even though we're a distributed team all over the world, making sure to engage our team members early on to the extent we can. Obviously, there are some instances, an acquisition, for example, you're not going to
out every single detail every single time.
Exactly. However, we have structures in place. We have regular all hands meetings. We have a people team that gives surveys twice a year, ENPS surveys, Employee Net Promoter Score surveys, and then a more deep dive satisfaction survey. And we take that information, digest it, and then share it with leadership, share it with the board so that everybody knows how are people feeling, what are they worried about? Because when it comes to decision making, not everybody can have, not everybody can have a say in the decision itself, but you can certainly get feedback.
Can you tell me more about that? Tell me more about how you collect that feedback, and it actually leads into how do you keep institutional knowledge from being lost in the organization? So how do you get that feedback, and then how do you maintain institutional knowledge?
Yeah, that's a really important point about institutional knowledge, especially when it comes to growth. Because you can the values on how we operated 6 years ago, it's just simply not going to be the same, and that's hard for people sometimes. Sometimes you feel like you're losing the company that the little company that could starts experiencing all this growth, and it's like, well, that's great, but it feels different. But we have all company weeks where we bring everybody together. I think that in-person connection is really important because we don't have the benefit of just sitting around the water cooler, and going to get coffee together. But we also do have in-person team meetings. So, we recognize the importance of having that time just to talk. We have a mentorship program where we try to make sure that every person who joins the company participates in their first year. And when people join the company, they have a buddy. So you can have those conversations. And the idea with the buddy is that this is somebody you can ask any question of. We try to pair them in from different orgs so that, when you're brand new, it's kind of like, oh, how am I doing? I don't want to ask anything dumb. So you have somebody that you can just say, hey, how does this work with the all hands meetings? Why do we do this? Who do I go to for this, that, or the other? And through that, you're passing on institutional knowledge. Yeah, one thing that I love too is, we had this, like I said, we had this leadership change recently, and Ben has done a lot to kind of create the culture of, where we understand what the values are. And one thing I love is that Colby has carried on that tradition. So at the beginning of important meetings, we start with the values. And that tone from the top is really important. We do 6-month mentor program cycles, and we do mentor pairings. It's not always, mentor or mentee, because everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something to learn. And at the last kickoff, Anna Johnson, who's running the program, started out with the values. And I thought I love this. And then we also did a values reboot last year. which I think was really important because, like I said, people who have been around a long time, things are starting to feel different. We're adding people, they're coming from different places that maybe don't understand why we do things the way we do, because it can come across as very different. It is different, intentionally so.
Intentionally.
And so if you don't communicate why we do those things, then you can run into some problems, some lack of
The
understanding.
why ends up being the biggest barrier for success, right? When people don't understand why certain things are happening, it tends to halt execution. It ends up being a barrier. Their understanding is as important as the understanding of those who actually put together the strategy, the decision maker. So
Yeah.
super important point. So before we go, I have two more questions, one of which is really about some of the operational challenges that you anticipate as you continue to expand your market presence at StorJ. What are some of the operational challenges you see today and experience? And of course, things that tie to the kinds of decisions that you're making.
Well, I think that it's the same with any company going through growth, is how do you keep everybody, if not rowing in unison, at least rowing in harmony? We have a great product. There is just no question about that. We have great timing. What's happening right now with the explosion of data and AI, and we have a fantastic foundation with it being built on these values, with it being an inclusive company, with it having input from people all over the world. But when you think about, company, what is it really other than a collection of people? And so, like I was saying, as we grow, you do get people coming from other companies who do things differently. So then you have to ask yourself, do we change? Do we do things differently? How do you make those decisions? And if we do, are we doing it thoughtfully? Do we have time to, slow down and have the conversations that we need to have? And it's always a balance. It's a balance because as you grow, that's just part of the nature of growth, is that it is going to change. And you don't have the luxury anymore of, having those casual conversations, but hopefully what's been put in place, the structures, things like, risk discussions, are they happening on a regular basis? Are we asking ourselves, what are the challenges that we're facing, and what's the compliance person? Right. Compliance person alert. It's the worst thing that can happen. I always have to have that somewhere in my mind. And are we ready for it if it does? And that comes down to one thing that I love, is that that's not just about things like, okay, data breach or whatever. It's also about what happens if our people who are here are not feeling good about being here. How do we identify what the issue is? And then what are we doing to make sure that we keep morale up and we keep people involved? Well, part of that, obviously, is just about involving people in the decision making. And even if it's not them having to say, again, it's at least soliciting their thoughts, because otherwise then you just start to feel like a cog in the wheel.
And then what's the ROI on that? Right? Because there are going to be costs when you decide to do that. And then there should be some level of reward. How does that balance out? How does that get us closer to the vision and to the mission? So I completely understand. Hey, thank you so much. This next part is a fun little exercise, and it's called Decide How You Decide. So what we're trying to do here is kind of go, what's your decision-making style? So I have some questions that I've put together. These questions are about a fictitious go-to-market strategy. So we're going to go, which of these buckets do you fit in? So do you identify with how I ask the question? So I'm going to ask a set of 4 questions, and then you'll tell me which one is your question. Okay. All right. So the first question: how does our new compliance strategy reflect our values and our relationships with customers? Are we being true to ourselves? Okay. The next question is, what trends from last year's regulatory changes can we leverage to enhance our compliance strategy? The next question: what lessons from our past compliance initiatives can we guide us now? What should we repeat or what should we avoid? The next question, what data can support our new compliance initiatives? How do we ensure our decisions are evidence-based? Which of those questions reflects the way you would ask?
All of them.
It's all of them. Well,
All of the above.
good.
All of the above. And can you say what the first one was?
So the first one is a feeler. We call that a feeler. So how does your new compliance strategy reflect our values? It's mostly your instinct and gut-driven method of making decisions. The next one is a planner. I'm going to look at last year's trend and sort of predict how we move forward. Then I'm going to count. I'm going to look at how that initiative did and then go from there. And then I'm data-driven. I'm going to look over the course of multiple periods of time. So the best news for you is it's actually a whole trick question because the goal is to become balanced in your decision-making. All of these things have to be at play when you decide and not just one. So most people, though, fall into one bucket or the other. And so that's why we ask. But that's not the overall intent. The intent is to be across buckets.
That makes me think of something that I just want to add in here, because when you mentioned the first one, I think about collaborative and I think about learning from others outside of the organization. Now, I was talking about how people come from different companies and they bring different perspectives, and sometimes that it might clash with how we operate or how we are. And at the same time, it is so rich and so beautiful because we are getting all of this experience from these different organizations. And one of the things that we do, we have a week-long orientation when people join us. And one of the things that we ask is, what have you seen that has worked well? What have you seen that has not gone well? And we take that. And so we get that rich data or the rich input about what others have seen and we apply it. I also make a point to be involved outside of StorJ. So I sit on the board of the Institute for Security and Technology, and they're looking at what are the risks that are presented by the emerging technology and what can we do about it? How can we educate policymakers who don't have time to stay on top of all of the tech that's moving so fast? So I learned from those outside organizations as well. And then on the question of what went wrong before or what did we do in the past that we can take forward, we do postmortems, and you keep that data. When somebody leaves, we have exit interviews, and then the information is put together, anonymized, but shared. If you can collect all the data you want, but if it's not being communicated, it's not being put to use.
Not super helpful. This has been fantastic. I have one more question, and it's intended to be a rapid fire response.
Okay.
So in your industry, what is the top decision in the next 3 months that you foresee leaders in your industry having to make?
I think that generally it's about how blockchain and digital assets are going to be regulated.
That's good. That's good. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. We appreciate you on Dynamic Decisions. Thank you so much. We just so appreciate. Would you tell our audience how to find you, how to learn more about your organization, StorJ?
Certainly. Best place is just going straight to our website, which is storj.io. And then I would also encourage everybody to check out Storage Institute. And it is storageinstitute.org. And then also you can find us on LinkedIn, on, various social media platforms. And please reach out and connect. And I'm really looking forward to learning from the others that you have on this podcast. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much.